Well, a very warm welcome to another vlog. This time around, it's all about Scotland as a landscape photography location. So if you haven't visited Scotland, this is the video for you, as we're going to visually tour the best landscape photography locations and some of the images that I've taken along the way. We're also going to explore the history of photography in Scotland briefly and how it became a mecca for photographers. Is there another country that has more to offer landscape photographers? And we're not solely talking about the variety of landscapes, from mountains to glens to forests, and the epic seascapes that make Scotland a world-renowned photography location. Scotland has the changeable weather, the perfect positioning in the northern latitude to deliver sublime light, and not just at sunrise and sunset. It's got atmosphere and character and a history that's forged into the landscape in the forms of ancient standing stones to medieval castles. When I compare other popular landscape photography locations I've been lucky enough to visit, such as Iceland on a number of occasions, Lofoten and the mighty fjords, the might of Yosemite in California, and of course the stunning country that is my native country of Ireland. But it's Scotland that leaves a desire to return again and again, and like no other place. And that's why, if it wasn't for an injury to my calf muscle earlier in the autumn, I'd be exploring the lochs, glens and hills of the Isle of Mull this month. But that adventure is going to have to wait for another time. But it has given me an opportunity to revisit some photos, and I focused on Scotland as the theme, hence the video today. Now, as an Irish nature photographer, there's also that Celtic connection with Scotland, the culture that connects Ireland and the Irish with Scotland, the songs, the music, the poetry, the language. The Irish and Scots Gaelic language are derived from the landscape, the words. Now, I've recently popped in and out of this wonderful book written by an absolute treasure of the Irish nation, Mancan Magan, 32 Words for Field, and that title, it says it all. Mancan passed away recently, an important voice for language and culture taken from us way too early. An absolute gent and a treasure trove of how our language is fused with the landscape. So there's that romanticism etched into the landscapes of the Highlands. And that, combined with the sheer beauty of the Scottish landscape, stirs up emotions in the soul. It's got it all. And there's a price, and that's usually buckets of rain. But that rain is an important ingredient in making Scotland what it is for photographers. The pace at which the weather moves, the downpours that drench the hills. It provides the atmosphere, and finally, and most importantly, the light that follows. And when that light cuts through dark clouds with rain, there is nowhere else on the planet that has landscapes to show off more than Scotland. Scotland's reputation as a place of dramatic beauty was shaped during the 18th and 19th centuries, but it was in the Victorian era that the Highlands truly captured the wider imagination. Before then, the Highlands had been regarded as remote and dangerous, geographically and politically. But with the rise of romanticism in the arts, championed by Turner and Constable, amongst others, these artists expressed a heightened emotion and represented the power of nature really for the first time in their work. And this in turn captured the imagination of the general public and naturally led to a celebration of Scotland's wild landscapes. It was painters such as Horatio McCulloch and poets such as Sir Walter Scott that presented the Highlands as sublime, picturesque and full of heroic history. Their work was exhibited in London at the time, and this inspired curiosity and admiration. Queen Victoria's own love affair with Scotland, especially after she and Prince Albert bought Balmoral Castle in 1852, it cemented that image. And the royal connection encouraged tourism, with new railways making the journey north far more accessible. And apart from the dedicated royal line to Balmoral Castle, tourists from London, for example, would take the train to Inverness and the Kyle line, built in the 1890s, to visit the Isle of Skye and the Highlands. Now, initially it wasn't photography, but sketching and painting landscapes that became the order of the day. By the late 19th century, Scotland had become a fashionable destination, its mountains, lochs and glens already carrying the aura of romance created by Victorian artists and writers. But it was actually earlier that the publication of a book, Sun Pictures in Scotland, but established landscape as a central theme in Scottish photography. But for myself and my generation and previous generation, it's got to be the work of Colin Pryor. And also, I have to say, one of my favourite UK landscape photographers, Joe Cornish. And since then, there has been a pilgrimage of landscape photographers visiting Scotland. Okay, so we're going to walk through the most revered and visited Highland and Island destinations in this video. We're going to start in the majestic valleys of Glencoe, journey along the A82, one of the most scenic road trips in the world, that stretches from Glasgow to Fort William, before we veer off in the direction of the Isle of Skye. And after Skye, we're going to hop on a ferry to Lewis and Harris, and then finish up in the magnificent Torridon and Loch Marie. For Irish landscape photographers, it's easy to travel to the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. It's a stone's throw away. 60 miles from Belfast to Cairnryan on the ferry, and a 4-hour drive will bring you into the heart of the Highlands in Glencoe. Alternatively, it's a short flight to Glasgow and a short drive from there to the shores of Loch Lomond. Now, dependent on what part of the world you may be arriving from, Aberdeen, Inverness or Edinburgh may well be your starting points. They're all relatively equidistant from the Highlands. Now, if you're not overly familiar with Scotland as a landscape photography location, in 2017, a poll by readers of the Rough Guide travel publication, they voted Scotland the most beautiful country in the world, #1. And that's why it's no surprise that it's a dream come true for many landscape photographers around the world to visit Scotland at least once in their lifetimes. Now, starting in Glencoe, the busy A82, it cuts through the vast moorland of Rannochmoor, and shortly after, the first views of the iconic Buccleuch of Moor greet us. It's an unforgettable sight, and the impact of it does not diminish on return visits. It's that impressive. So if it's your first time there, driving from Rannoch into Glencoe, you're in for a real treat. Now, we'll come back to Rannoch later in the video, but for now, let's visit the main locations around Glencoe. And we're going to do that in sequence from south to north. All are along the road or just off it as we travel through the valley, ending in Glencoe village. So our first unmissable location is Blackrock Cottage, and unsurprisingly, like many images in Glencoe, the Buccleuch of Moor is the looming mountain in the background. This is an easy access site. Just turn off for the ski centre. The cottage is unmistakable on the right. Pull into the rough ground off the road to the left and find your own composition from the road. It's as easy as that. A sunrise will illuminate the cottage and the mountain. The next up is the King's House Hotel. There tends to be red deer around the car park. There's fantastic opportunities along the river behind the hotel and towards the Buccleuch. So if you're heading in that direction, behind the hotel and towards the impressive Buccleuch, you can't miss it. Or alternatively, you can walk up the West Highland Way, the stony track starting in the car park, and then cut down across the header to the river. There's a number of rapids down there. I'd skip this location, the King's House Hotel, unless you're hungry and fancy a good feed. Because if we've limited time, continue along the A82 and take the next left turn. Park along the road just over the bridge for the A82 waterfall. Walk back across the bridge, cut left into the heathland, and the location is 20 yards or so in. It's very slippy, it's a mud bath in wet weather, so be careful. Now here you may want to shoot a slower exposure to smooth the water, but be conscious of any wind that may blur the tree to the left. Maybe take a second faster exposure. It's a sublime sunrise location. You're shooting towards the mountain with your back to the sun. Now the location is worth spending a whole morning at. After you take your obligatory shots of the waterfall, explore other angles and compositions, then walk upstream, keeping the river to your left. There are so many compositions to be found in that direction, with the buccal in front of you, but also look behind. Now I'll show a selection of images after this segment. Now before leaving, don't forget to explore the area on the far side of the river from where you are. And you do this by crossing the bridge again, maybe to where you have your car parked, and enter the heathland from that side. You can look for pools, for reflection shots, and don't ignore the stunning birch groves in the area. Okay, next up we can park at Altnafach, one of the most spectacular views in the whole of Scotland, but it requires some work. Now the hike up the slopes of Ben Cralashta is a little bit strenuous. You don't have to go all the way. Just go part of the way to get that view. But if fitness is an issue, stay down in the valley. There's another white cottage down there and wonderful compositions throughout. Next up, the Ralston Cairn area, and park at the large pull-in on the left before we enter the tight turns in the road at the Three Sisters. Now, if we can park here, we can cross the road carefully, hop over the barrier, and then if there's not too much water, we can cross the river. Once the river is crossed, we'll encounter the pathway, turn left and continue on until you reach one of the most epic views in all of Glencoe, with the imposing Three Sisters on the left. Now, next up, as we pass through the bends in the road, there's a fine waterfall on the left, and you can access that beneath the road. But let's move on to the next top location. It can be tricky to find and park for, and there's other videos on locating the S-Mens, but don't miss it. It's a top 5 location in Glencoe. It's not that easy to create a good composition here. It's a very wide shot if we want to capture the rapids and the Three Sisters, but it is important to get close to the water as it's channeled through the bends. We're on the home run now to the village of Glencoe. There are literally dozens of other wonderful locations in the area, but I'm going to finish on 2 that are easy access. Glencoe Locations, which is signposted just off the village, and then there's the breadth of Loch Leven looking out from the verge in front of the village. So there it is, Glencoe in a nutshell. Now you could spend a week or more exploring so many of the sites within the valley and on the roads off it. I haven't even covered the Glen Ative road, and that leads all the way down to Loch Ative. It's a long drive and there's at least a day's photography there. But I hope this has given a taste of what Glencoe has to offer. The great advantage of Glencoe is its accessibility, particularly from Glasgow. There's a sound argument that Glencoe is the most epic landscape in all of Scotland. You'll have as many who'll agree with you as disagree with you on this point. I'm going to give you my top 4 at the end of the video, my number 1, 2, 3 and 4 sites. Now, there's a downside to Glencoe. We've a dangerous and busy road, the A82, running through the valley. And if this were anywhere else, it would greatly detract from the experience. But Glencoe exists on such an epic scale that it only puts a small dent into the experience of taking photographs there. Now, before we venture off to the misty Isle of Skye, let's stay with the road north from Glasgow to Skye, because there's a number of locations on or off the road that are well worth a stop on the way. Loch Lomond doesn't offer many places to pull in, as the narrow road skirts the loch. Firkin Point is one such place, so try to stop there if the light is good, and especially on a calm day, it's suited to good reflections. A little further on are the Falls of Falloch. Both the river here and the falls offer plenty of opportunity for photography. Now, moving north again, a 20-minute detour just before the bridge of Orchy will bring us to Kilchurn Castle. It's a must-see sight, so try not to pass if you're going to Glencoe. Try to take the 20-minute detour, it's well worth it. The castle is on the opposite side of the lake, and it's really, really beautiful. Possibly best as a sunrise shot, but just try to visit at any time. It's worth the detour. We're moving north again, and just before we arrive at Glencoe, we have the expanse of Rannochmoor. Try not to pass this site either, especially if it's calm for reflections. Again, limited parking and pull-ins. You can find them on Google Earth with a careful search along this stretch of busy road. Now, I've visited here a number of times at sunrise, but just didn't get the calm conditions. It really needs almost zero wind. Now, we're going to travel north from Glencoe, and there's two locations that I have to mention. West of Fort William, the wreck at Corpac, which lies beneath the bulk of Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in the UK, and also the viaduct at Glenfinnan, made famous in the Harry Potter movies as the Hogwarts train steams over it, and still does. You need to get the timing of it just right. But we also have access there to the beautiful Loch Shiel, also featured in Harry Potter and Highlander, one of my favourite movies as a teenager, with Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery. Now, on the eastern side of Fort William is the impressive Glen Nevis. We didn't get up to the Steel Waterfall when visiting due to torrential rainfall, but the valley of Glen Nevis is ripe for woodland and river photography throughout. And I'll show a couple of abstract images in the segment after this. Now, we're almost at Skye, about 15 minutes from the Skye Bridge, but we just can't pass by what is probably the most photographed castle in all of Scotland, Island Dunnan. And it's an easy location. It's just a pull in from the road if you're going to Skye. And I've searched for different compositions here, but I think the classic shot, which is basically taking your tripod out and placing it in the car park, at the edge of the car park over the water, you can't beat that. So we've arrived at Skye, the Misty Isle as it's called. It's the very epicenter of everything that is mystical and magical in Scotland. And we need go no further than the place names again. From the fairy pools to the Kerrang to the Old Man of Store, Skye is steeped in Celtic and Norse mythology, folklore and legend. And the geological folds of the land reflects that aura back onto the visitor. The landscape in Skye, it's instantly recognisable and it's unique within Scotland. In many respects, that geology, volcanic in origin, created such strange and imposing features that the Celtic and Norse cultures developed myths to almost every part of the island. Giants, warrior women, fairies, selkies, kelpies, shift-shaping beings. We're stepping into another dimension, and movie directors such as Steven Spielberg with the BFG and Ridley Scott with Prometheus were well aware of the appeal. Now it's worth mentioning that although it's an island, Skye is connected to the mainland by a bridge, named unsurprisingly the Skye Bridge. Also worth to mention is that Skye is big, really big. For example, it's a good 1.5 hours drive from the Skye Bridge to the Kerrang. But some of the locations, such as Elgall, are almost an hour's drive detour off that route. So planning locations, sunrises, sunsets are a really important part of visiting. Now another point worth noting is that almost all of the locations, unlike Glencoe, should be given and demand a good portion of a day. So maybe only consider maybe covering 1 or 2 locations per day. It'll make the trip much more enjoyable, even if you suffer a little FOMO. With that in mind, if I were to visit only 4 locations in Skye, they would be in this order: the Old Man of Store, the Kerrang, Elgall and Neast Point Lighthouse. But let's start our whistle-stop tour around the island, and the first location we'll encounter after crossing the Skye Bridge is another bridge. It's an old market where the river divides the Red and the Black Coolin mountains. So if you get a day where the taller, more impressive Black Coolin are visible, consider yourself lucky. It's not called the Misty Isle for no reason. And the Black Coolin are considered the most challenging peaks in the UK to climb. Now on one visit we stayed in the Sliggigan Inn, right beside the bridge, and I'd highly recommend it. The staff are welcoming, the food was really good, and best of all, there's a number of trails, locations that start at the inn, so there's no need to drive anywhere if you want to take it easy for a day. But it's the bridge that's iconic. Watch the traffic here as the footpath isn't wide enough to set a tripod up on. However, a 10-minute walk will bring you into a peaceful valley with wonderful panoramics, or alternatively walk up the hotel side of the river for many rapids with the Black Coolin in the background. Now unless you're going to cover Elgall as your first stop on the island, and it's remote, it's an hour's drive from Sliggigan, away from the other top sites on the island, it's really worth taking a day here at Elgall, or at the very least a half a day, as there's so much to photograph on the way out. It's a stunning drive. And if you've no experience of driving remote areas of Scotland, there is usually room for but 1 car on the roads, and there's many pullover spots to allow passing. Elgall, named after Norse gods. The steep drive down to the harbour is worth the hour's drive out as the peaks of the Black Coolins come into view. It's a real wow moment, and what we're looking for here is foreground to a seascape that includes the mountains as a backdrop. Now the harbour is good, but better still are the rocks at the end of the boulder beach in the direction of the mountains. Now in addition to the classic view, we can take a boat and it brings us into the heart of the Black Coolins from Elgall to spend a few hours in a very special location indeed, Loch Corrusk. Sir Walter Scott himself wrote about this place, the wildest scene in the Highlands and probably in all of Scotland. Now in truth, from a compositional perspective, the view to capture here is high above, and it's a serious hike. And it's often called the best view in the UK. It's atop a mountain Skye, but there's opportunities below where the boat drops us off, within that amphitheatre of Loch Corrusk. The first time I visited Elgol, I was accosted by Highland cows in the dark, so I just sat there for 5 minutes or so. They made their way around the car. Okay, next up, the old man of Storr. If we could visit only one location on Skye, this is it. And if you can walk uphill, it's steep in parts, but it's not too bad. For an hour, it's about an hour up. Don't miss this location. It's a sunrise shoot, very early start. Maybe start walking from the car park about 2 hours before sunrise, and that'll give plenty of time to settle on a composition. You'll see the old man as you ascend to the left. Don't stop, keep going. You need to pass by it and gain as much elevation as you can. There's a steep, grassy mound far ahead. On top of this is probably the best vantage point. Turn around and be wowed. Now, if you're not fit enough to make it up, there's an alternative viewpoint from the roadside lake, particularly if it's calm for reflection. We're moving on. A 25-minute drive further along is the Kerrang. And the Kerrang and the Old Man of Storr are part of the Trotternish Ridge, the largest landslip in the UK. It started over 10,000 years ago and it's still slip sliding away today, hence the constant need for road repairs. There's a pay car park at the Kerrang, and unless you're here early, expect it to be full. We walk down the road onto the grass and the views are just incredible all around when we look to the right with the cliffs of the Kerrang to the left. Don't be afraid to crack out a longer lens here and look for abstracts in the landscape. Or alternatively, you can try the well-known tree that grows in a crag not far from the start of the trail. This trail works its way across the ridge and then up between a chasm in the cliffs, opening up many compositional opportunities from above. And it's a place I would love to return to and explore some more. I just didn't give it enough time on the 2 occasions I was there. Now, there's so many other locations to visit that I won't have time to review here. Not far from the Kerrang is a waterfall, Kilt Rock. You're hemmed into the car park here. It's difficult to get a good shot. You're leaning over a railing onto the cliff where the waterfall falls into the sea. I'd skip it or, pop out and have a quick view. Don't skip the fairy pools. They're well worth a visit. And if time allows, you'll need 3 to 4 hours to make it to the most photogenic part of the falls. That's beneath the well-known gully on Skye na Fadden. There's a large car park here and it's a good hour to the falls closest to the imposing mountain that you'll see in the distance. Bring the wellies to get into the stream and of course a few ND filters to smooth the flow of that water. On my last visit, the sky was cloudless and as you'll see from the image at the end of this section, it's not really ideal. We want rainy atmosphere combined with the visibility of the peaks. A perfect combination for the Highlands. That's just not that common. Now finally, Neast Point Lighthouse. It's probably the most jaw-dropping lighthouse you'll see anywhere in the world. And that's more to do with the location of the lighthouse. It's another long drive out. That side of the island is not as spectacular as other places we visited for the drive. And it's probably best as a sunset location. The view from atop the cliff, just walk along the cliff with the lighthouse to your left and be careful. You'll find a place well trodden with the feet of landscape photographers. Now, if you walk down to the level below the cliffs, and that's using the steps that lead down to the lighthouse, directly below the car park, then immediately cut across to the right so that we can see the lighthouse and the cliff breaking the horizon, and it makes a much more impactful image. It does require a little extra care here as you're on a very steep grassy bank. Will fall off the cliff below. So there's my top picks for Skye, and it's from Uig in Skye that we'll travel to our next and a very different Scottish landscape with far less people. And really, that's the only downside with Skye. It's the sheer volume of tourists at most sites. Now the ferry that crosses the Minch, which is the stretch of water that separates Skye from Harris and Lewis, takes about 1 hour and 40 minutes. It departs Uig in Skye and lands at Tarbert, and that's an excellent base to explore Harris. Tarbert's a 20-minute drive from its crown jewel, Luscantire and Celebos Beach. The two place names Harris and Lewis are essentially one island. Harris in the south with the stunning beaches primarily on the western side, and Lewis to the north, a land of vast peatlands and cliffs, and it has the world-renowned Callanish standing stones. We'll come to them later. And together they form the largest island of the Outer Hebrides. So, why do photographers flock to the western beaches of Harris? Well, it's a combination of the jagged peaks, the North Harris Hills, looming over the beaches, providing the perfect background for images. It's also the azure to deep blue colour that the shallow water off Luscantire reflects, and obviously the pristine sands. Now it's probably best to venture out onto the sands of Luscantire as your first stop in Harris, just to get a feel for the place. It's very large, it's an open beach, and it's best suited to abstract images using a slow enough shutter speed for either sea or sky. I found that filling the lower 2/3 of the frame with the beach and the sea and reserving the upper third to the hills works best. Now, unless you count patterns in the sand as foreground, there really isn't any foreground to be found on Luscantire, and that is as much a part of its appeal. It's very, very minimalist. Now there is an option to shoot from the high dunes, of which I spent a morning exploring. It's challenging compositionally, but all the ingredients that we need are there. We just need time. Celebos Beach, which is just across the bay from Luscantire, has more in the way of foreground, with rocks and smaller coves, areas with well-defined patterns in the sand and dunes. And there's plenty of other beaches along the western shore as you drive south. I probably got my favourite image at Nikkor Beach, simply because we were passing there when the light turned magical just for 10 or 15 minutes. Now there are some interesting inlets in the salt marsh at Norton and shapes in the salt marsh. The interior of Harris is dotted with hundreds of lochans, but I would pass up on exploring this area unless you have time. Just stay with the beaches. That's what Harris does best. Now a stunning drive that I'd highly recommend is west from Tarbert through the North Harris Mountains with the sea to our left, and it eventually leads to Husselness Beach. It's a small beach, it's got good potential. It's a beautiful remote area, but the real star of the show here is a 30-minute hike to Traw Vallon, and it's along a cliff path. And this beach impressed me as much as Luscantyre. There's no human presence here, and I was the only person there. It's totally untouched. Deer tracks rather than footsteps in the dunes. But it does require an effort to get there. I didn't reach it until the end of the day. It was quite a dull day, so I'd recommend dedicating a full day if you have the time. Now, before we move to our final destination in Scotland, do not leave Harris and Lewis without visiting and photographing the Callanish Standing Stones. They're out of the way as such, a long drive to get there through vast empty moorlands, but it's well worth the trip. And if you make it there, why not push further out west into that remoteness to the Mangersat sea stacks? Well worth photograph. I'm aware we only scratched the surface in Harris and Lewis, but if you're there for 4 to 5 days, I would still recommend concentrating your photographing time around the beaches of Harris. The next and final location on our itinerary today is Torridon. Even the name projects might. It actually translates from the Gaelic as a place of transference, quite spiritual. It's located in Wester Ross, and it's the most northerly of our 4 locations. Now, Torridon, it is a destination in itself, and it's worthy as a week's photographic trip without visiting any other areas, but it could be paired with Glencoe or Skye. Now, regardless of how we get there, the peaks and forests of Torridon offer a very different experience. It's quieter, there's less people. Its forests are the oldest Caledonian forests in Scotland, particularly at Ben in nearby Loch Marie, often referred to as the most beautiful loch in all of Scotland. And its massive Torridonian sandstone mountain range is over 1 billion years old. Landscape photographers are also drawn to the single characterful Scots pine trees on the shores of the loch. I've made but one visit to Torridon and it impressed me no end, even though I was imprisoned in my own camper van for 2 days on the shores of Lough Marie whilst Storm Babette battered the country. Approaching from the south, the elevated southern and northern roads of Upper Lough Torridon show off the majesty of the peaks in the area best, so take time to drive them. There are forests and a waterfall or two in this area as well. Next, make your way around into Lough Marie, a magnificent drive with Lough Clare on the way, an unmissable location just off the road to the right. As the road then descends into Kinloch Dewey, the river and old woodland to the right are very impressive and may be worth a good wander around this area looking for compositions. Next up, we proceed into the shores of Lough Marie. Find the locations of the lone Scots pine trees here. They're well worth seeking out. And make sure to explore the forest of Benay, not far from the lone Scots pine trees. So everything's close together there. The whole loch and area is magnificent. So that storm limited my exploration of Torridon, but it made such an impression on me that I will return to it one day and I will dedicate 4 or 5 days photography to the place. Highly recommend it. So there it is, 4 stunning locations in the Highlands of Scotland: Glencoe, Skye, Lewis and Harris and Torridon. Now I have a list as long as my arm of future Scottish trips to make. The Isle of Mull for both landscapes and wildlife, the Isle of Egg for the history and the epic views across to the mountains of Rum. I have that image imprinted in my mind. Asint the Cairngorms. I really think Scotland is a place that can provide a lifetime of landscape photography adventures. Now I did promise at the start that I would list my favourite locations 1, 2, 3 and 4. And it's very difficult to do that. There are many aspects to a landscape photography trip. Most important to me is the peace and quiet of nature and the beauty of a place. But I'm going to judge my top 4 based on compositions and locations alone. Number 1 is Glencoe. Number 2 is Skye. Number 3 is Harris and Lewis. And number 4, it's strange that I'm describing Torridon at the bottom of the list. But yet, I'd go straight back to Torridon for a week. And that maybe gives an impression of how impressive all of these locations are. So I very much hope you've enjoyed the vlog. I hope, if you haven't visited Scotland, that this might encourage you to consider booking a trip there. It is magnificent and I can't wait to go back again. So until next time, thanks very much for watching.